It seems so recent, but it was already 2 years ago that Ben Jansen of Bob and Linda was in here preaching and leading a second-hour discussion about the values of money, a title that was directly referencing Mark Carney's book, Values. And now suddenly that guy is prime minister. Not Ben, but Carney. The most recent numbers are that his Liberals are 2 seats away from a majority, and Waterloo Region has, I guess, played a role in holding them back, with 2 ridings flipping from Liberal to Conservative this time around, along with the previously Green riding here in Kitchener Centre. And apart from the particular candidates involved there, I'm personally glad they didn't quite get to the majority 172 seats. I like minority governments. I like how it makes parties have to talk to each other and work together a little bit. That collaboration and conversation creates a bit of accountability in government and also feels more representative of the conversations that happen outside the House of Commons. And Carney, for all his talk of wanting a majority mandate to fight the tariffs or what have you, has voiced support for that kind of collaboration in the past. One line from his book reads, "When we work together, our shared federation has the potential to make us more economically resilient." Not exactly mystical ecstasy there, but the point comes across. Actually, for all his worldly pocketbook concerns, Carney does have a certain religiosity about him. The algorithm has recently been taking my searches on Carney and combining them with my searches about the papal conclave to feed me stories about just how Catholic Carney is. One of these was a video of a press conference where a reporter comments on how Carney goes to Mass every week and asks him if his Catholicism will have an influence on his policies, especially around a woman's right to choose abortion. Carney is clearly surprised by the question and says he doesn't usually speak about his personal faith or spirituality, although it might inform his sense of responsibility and service. On a woman's right to choose, he says he stands unreservedly with the Liberal Party on this, an answer that has earned him a number of scathing articles in outlets like the Catholic Register. After seeing that press conference, I was curious if there was any other info on Carney's religiosity. The only faith he talks about in his book is faith in the market, which, to give him credit, he does argue needs to be reined in a little bit. A 2021 Wall Street Journal article notes that Carney, quote, goes to Catholic church at least once a week, that's a lot, meditates, and is a fan of Benedictine monk Lawrence Freeman, the director of the World Community of Christian Meditation, end quote. I'll take Lawrence Freeman over Milton Friedman any day. The Benedictines, you might know, were like the main Christian monastic order throughout a good chunk of the Middle Ages up until the 12th century. And Saint Benedict first wrote his book of rules for the order back around 500 CE, the Rule of Saint Benedict, which outlines how monks and nuns should organize their days around sleep, prayer, reading scripture, and then also doing manual labor like farming and crafts to make these communities fairly self-sufficient. The rule also talks about the vows that a monk has to take, promises to God that become the moral fabric of those communities. We often hear about the monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. These have become the central vows of some later orders like the Franciscans and the Jesuits. But for the Benedictines, there's a slightly different list of 3. Chapter 58 in the rule talks about people who first come to the monastery wanting to become monks and says, quote, "Do not grant newcomers to the monastic life an easy entry, but, as the apostle says, test the spirits to see if they are from God," end quote. Benedict says to let them stand there knocking for 4 or 5 days to prove that they are patient under harsh conditions, and if they're still persistent, to finally let them in, but only into the guest quarters. They should stay for a few days, and if they're still interested, they can move to the part of the monastery where the novices study, eat, and sleep. At that point, an elder is assigned to watch over them and to explain very clearly the harsh conditions of being a monk or a nun. After 2 months there, the elder should read to them the whole rule and then give them the option to leave at that point. If they choose to stay, they continue with the novices for another 6 months, when the rule is read to them again. If they again choose to stay, they have to wait another 4 months, and then the rule is read to them again. And if they again choose to stay, then they are accepted into the community as a novice and are no longer free to leave. At that point, the entrant goes before the whole community and takes 3 vows: the vow of stability, of conversion of life, and of obedience. The vow of stability is interesting. It's the vow to live in one particular Benedictine community for life. Gerald Schlabach wrote a paper on this. Gerald is an Anabaptist scholar who is also a Benedictine oblate, meaning he has taken vows as a Benedictine even though he isn't Catholic, which is apparently something that they allow. He claims that this vow of stability has a lot to offer our churches in this age when our commitments to things are more and more fragile, and when people move around so much. We almost expect our kids won't live in the same places we do. The vow of stability teaches the importance of slowing down and sitting with each other to really listen for God's will. In Schlabach's words, quote, "hunkering down to stay together through the long haul," end quote. So that's the first vow, the vow of stability. But it's really the second vow I'd like to focus on this morning. In English, this vow is often translated as conversion of life, but Benedict's original Latin is conversatione morum, and it's not totally clear what that means. Morum is like our English word mores, like customs, conversion of customs or habits. But the word for conversion here, conversatio, is the same as our word conversation. Benedict uses the word conversation for conversion. It was Lawrence Freeman who first put me on to this, that Benedictine monk Mark Carney is a fan of. He brings up this distinction in his blog posts a lot between conversion and conversation. And as a big etymology nerd myself, there are few things in this life that make me as emotional as learning some surprising root of a word. Music can do it, like Verdi's Requiem, for example. Sports highlights is the other thing. Sometimes I really do cry at sports highlights. And then etymology. And so I was really moved when I learned that our word conversation, which seems like such a plain old word, originally meant either a place where one lives or dwells, a conversation, or also general course of actions or habits, manner of conducting oneself in the world. Both of those senses now obsolete. Your conversation is the place where you live, and it's how you conduct yourself. How does the same word mean these two things? And also whatever we mean by it today, talking with others. Also, how did Varsho make that behind-the-back catch the other day? When Lawrence Freeman posts about this, the conversion thing, not the Varsho catch, he doesn't get into all the linguistic scholarship. He's interested in using the distinction for pastoral care and for teaching about meditation. He says conversio, conversion, just means turning. And in the context of Jesus' teachings, it means turning away, we're talking about conversion here, turning away from focusing on ourselves and our own wants, and turning towards God. Conversatio, conversation, is a continual turning over and over again, and the whole process of transformation that comes along with that. When our attention is always on ourselves, we get isolated and stuck. But when we turn our attention to God, the ground of our being, and enter into conversation with Him, our hearts soften and we become open to transformation and transcendence. Meditation is one place this conversation can take place, turning our focus from our thoughts and worries and just focusing on the source of life and breath, and learning to return to that breath and that life over and over again. And one can think of a lot of other places where this type of model might be active. Think of coming out of the closet, for example. It's easy to think of this as a one-time thing. At one time, you're in the closet, and then another time, you're out of it. But coming out is something that happens again and again in the course of one's life, in conversation after conversation. Or think of vows themselves. The Benedictine novice waits for all those months until he or she can finally take those 3 vows in front of the community, but it's not like that's a one-time thing and then it's done. A vow is precisely a vow because it applies constantly from day to day. And in the same way, when a vow is broken, it doesn't mean it's just over. Benedict's rule is renowned for how realistic and moderate it is. If a monk or nun breaks their vows, there's a whole series of steps to try to help them get back in line, to return to the conversation. And conversation itself is a big part of that, especially conversation with elders in the community. Marriage vows are like this too. We say them at our weddings, but there's something we come back to day after day, and just like a conversation between two partners, they grow with us and take on new meaning and life in the present. Committing to conversation as a church, we're not really inventing any wheels here. This is something we already take for granted. And this phrase, to give and to receive counsel, that's always been a core Anabaptist tenet, one of the vows or covenants we make at baptism. But it's good to be explicit about what we take for granted every now and then. And I like how the word conversation has all these unexpected meanings. It has something to do with being in a place where one lives or dwells. Commitment to conversation in that sense might be commitment to caring for the land and water here, for our community here in the region, for this building. It's a lot like the vow of stability Schlabach was talking about. Conversation also used to mean a manner of conduct. I suppose we could commit more to however it is we're conducting ourselves, really commit to the shtick, but it feels like we need a bit more info there. Not just committing to any old manner of conducting ourselves, but committing to conducting ourselves well. And, well, that's already a big reason why we're here. Then there's the sense of conversation as conversion, the continual conversion that Lawrence Freeman talks about in his blog. There's a turning involved there, turning away from being self-centered, turning our focus toward God and toward others. And along with that turning and opening up to being transformed into the likeness of Christ. In a way, all of these stranger senses of the word conversation can be part of the sense that we're familiar with, that activity of just talking with one another, having dialogue. Good conversation isn't just a quick exchange of pleasantries. It's something more, something that takes some hunkering down and takes time, even takes some forgetting about time. And conversations do take a kind of good conduct. For example, they're not just one person lecturing or, dare I say, preaching at someone else. And here, I just want to express some appreciation for some of our speakers in the recent past. I think it was like 3 of our speakers during that Ephesians series this winter who referred to their sermons not as conclusive, authoritative statements, but just as parts of a conversation we were having about that letter, Ephesians. A good conversation is mutual and reciprocal, and I think the kids came up with that too. And that means we can't just not be self-centered. Conversations require something of you in your own contribution. Otherwise, you're just listening, and that's not reciprocal. You share some of your unique gifts while being open to receiving from others. And that openness does mean we may end up somewhere quite different from where we started. Maybe we're persuaded by someone else, converted in that sense, or it might just mean we've gone some distance on a path together. We've gone some distance on this path, mostly me speaking, and I still wanted to talk about having conversations as a church with other churches and other religions, but that topic will come up again sometime, I'm sure. As for Carney, I hope he does have some really good conversations at the Vatican today, where he's attending Pope Leo's inaugural Mass, and when he's back home. And in all those conversations, may he share his own gifts and also be open to others so that Canada might become more economically resilient and also just a nice place to hunker down. Thanks.